All right. Hey, everybody. I hope everyone is having a nice holiday season. It's been very different around here. Jasmine and Rusty have been here, and Ron has been home, and Mom has been here some. And this week I have 2 days, today and tomorrow, which are somewhat normal. And then Friday, everybody's back on vacation again. So things are going a little differently right now than normal. I don't have as much time to myself, but I'm really enjoying the holidays. So I hope you are too. Today we are going to be starting with quote number 165. And it's a very, very short quote from the 7 Steps to Awakening. It says, abandoning mental conditioning, be a liberated soul. Very, very short. Abandoning mental conditioning, be a liberated soul. So let's see how I contemplated that short little quote. So looking at out of the stillness, how do I like things to be? What do I not like about the way things are? What do I wish would change? Find every answer to these questions, and then realize that every answer given is part of the prison I keep myself in. Letting go of these ideas is like taking down the prison walls, stone by stone. When no answer to these questions arises in me, there is also no prison. So first of all, let me tell you all what I am doing during my private time, a part of what I'm doing during my private time now. I am using Out of the Stillness as my primary study. And as you guys know, I'm keeping a journal. And when I go through Out of the Stillness and I come across quotes like this, how do I like things to be? What do I not like about the way things are? What do I wish would change? Find every answer to these questions. I do that. I mean, I literally do that. I get my journal. I say a prayer for honesty. And then I look, what do I wish was different? What do I wish would change? And I write it out. And the reason I'm sharing that is because, now, of course, Out of the Stillness is available both on Kindle and paperback, which means that if some of you wanted to, you could begin to use it as your primary text for a while. And I just wanted to show you how I'm using it. So when I use it in my private time, I'm not just reading, right? I'm not just sitting there reading. If there is something in Out of the Stillness that prompts me to journal, like this quote does, I go and journal. So I just wanted to share that first of all. But secondly, one thing that really stands out to me about this particular entry, when no answer to these questions arises in me, there is also no prison. If we go back to the quote was, abandoning mental conditioning, be a liberated soul. Very short quote. But what's happening with number 165 is I'm looking to see what mental conditioning is still present. And I can recognize my mental conditioning by the judgments I'm making. So I ask, how do I like things to be? What do I not like about the way things are? What do I wish would change? And I write these things out in my journal. And what's happening, when I look at them, then I just kind of focus on, this is all conditioning. the way I want this thing to be, or how I want this thing to change. This is all conditioning. If I was a different person, meaning born in a different place, maybe a different time, raised by different people, the list wouldn't be the same. Right? The list of how I want things to be would be different. The list of what I don't like about the way things are would be different. The list of what I wish would change would be different. That is purely conditioning. And so first I do the honest journaling, but then I sit and I look at it and I realize what I'm looking at. I'm looking at conditioning. And, I adopted my daughter. I don't know if that's helpful to me or not in doing this work, but I adopted my daughter. She was born in China. And I know that she is the way she is because I adopted her and I raised her. She was, kind of raised in a different place than she would have been had she been raised by her birth parents. And so the person that she is not the person she would have been, or the person she would have been if she'd been raised in the orphanage, or the person she would have been if she'd been adopted by someone else. So it's very clear to me that this is all conditioning. Now, also, when I look at these questions, how do I like things to be? What do I not like about what things are? What do I wish would change? I realize, in addition to conditioning, this is suffering. I look at what I've written in my journal and I realize this is suffering. When I want things to be a certain way and they aren't, to some degree, I suffer. When I don't like things the way they are, to some degree, I suffer. When I want things to change, when I want them to be different than they are, to some degree, I suffer. So now I'm looking at what I have written in my journal, and I'm acknowledging this is just conditioning. It has nothing to do with who I am naturally. None of this was here when I was born, right? It was all added through learning and through judgments and through giving meaning, right? It's all just conditioning. And because of this conditioning, to some degree, I suffer. And I like to just sit and look at it and realize this is what I'm looking at. And then, like the quote says, abandoning mental conditioning, be a liberated soul, I realize that if I can just accept everything as it is, and that way I am abandoning the conditioning. If I can just accept everything as it is, be happy with how everything is now, I am liberated now. There is no suffering in that. So then I look at my list and I ask, can I accept this as it is? And sometimes I even measure the degree to which the resistance is there. Like, oh yeah, this is easy. I can just accept this. Now that I've sat here and I've looked at it with the realization that it's conditioning and with the realization that it's suffering, I'm done. Like, that's that. I can see it. Like, that was silly. But then some of them, it may not be so easy. So some of them I may say, there's medium resistance here, or there's low resistance here, or there's high resistance here. And it's interesting because I'm not doing anything with that. This is what's funny. I'm not doing anything with that except recognizing it. We could say noticing it. We could say bringing it into awareness. being honest about it. I'm being honest about it. Right? And I will tell you that multiple times I've over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, I've had the experience of going back and reading past entries in my journal like this one and realizing that thing's no longer a problem for me. That thing's no longer an issue for me. I no longer want that to change. So it's interesting how just doing the journaling, just looking at what I've journaled with the realization that wisdom is asking me or guiding me to look at it with, this is conditioning. Yes, I see that this is conditioning. Yes, I see if I have been born in another place or time, I may not want these things, right? Yes, I see there is some degree of suffering as long as I hold to these ideas. Now, am I willing to let them go and take that prison wall down stone by stone? Well, let's see. This one? Oh, yeah. Yeah. This one? Oh, I think I have medium resistance to taking down this stone. This one? I can feel a little bit of low resistance to taking down this stone. This one? Yeah, I can take that. I can forget about that. I can accept that as it is. This one? I feel some great resistance here. Right? And then usually there's some journaling that happens afterwards, after I do that little bit of awareness work. But the journaling is usually nothing more than inner wisdom bringing my attention back to the fact that this is conditioning, that this is not who I am, that what I am is before all of this, what I am is beyond all of this, that to some degree it's creating suffering. It might even remind me of things like I can't control the world, like I'm holding on trying to control the world and I'll never be able to do that. It just kind of reminds me of these basic essential, facts. And then, a month later, 2 months later, 6 months later, I'm reading that same page in my journal. I'm like, I don't feel these same things now like I did 6 months ago. Isn't that interesting? So bringing the light of wisdom to it in a focused way. And this bit of journaling that I'm talking about, it might have been a 2 to 3 hour journaling process. We're not talking about 5 minutes either. I'm spending some time bringing the light of awareness to this and looking at it and contemplating, I'm really being with it. I'm being with it. But then at some point I read that and it's like, isn't that interesting? That's not a problem for me anymore. I'm okay with that as it is now. So again, abandoning mental conditioning, that sounds like hard work. It sounds like something I have to do. And I guess what I'm saying is it's not exactly true. What I do is I bring it into awareness. What I do is I be honest with it. What I do is spend some time with it, looking at it honestly, realizing inner wisdom's perspective, like this is conditioning, this is suffering, realize, you are beyond this, realizing inner wisdom's perspective. But I don't actually dig down in the brain somehow and abandon it. You know what I mean? Like that seems to just happen when I bring the awareness to it. But again, it's not 2 minutes of awareness, right? It's some focused awareness. It's some heart awareness. Abandoning mental conditioning. Be a liberated soul. So if you have Out of the Stillness or anything similar to Out of the Stillness, and you read stuff like this, and you don't pause and do your own journaling, and bringing your own awareness to your own conditioning, you're missing the opportunity for the abandonment to happen, which is the miracle. The abandonment of the conditioning. You see, you're missing the opportunity because, there's a line in NTI Matthew that says something like, let me see if I can find it. Of course, I have NTI right here. Let's see if I can find it. I remember it's in NTI Matthew. I think it might be NTI Matthew chapter 5. I might not be able to find it quickly. I wish I knew this book by heart, but I don't. But I remember this one guy used to teach from NTI, and he used to call this the Spirit's admonition. And he read it at the beginning and ending of every one of his teachings. Maybe it's NTI Matthew chapter 6. Yes, it's NTI Matthew chapter 7. This is what he called the Spirit's admonition. He read it at the beginning and end of every one of his teachings. Do not take my words lightly without practice. For to listen and to agree, but not to practice, is not to have heard. And one who will not hear cannot be healed. I'll read that again. Do not take my words lightly without practice. For to listen and to agree, but not to practice, is not to have heard. And one who will not hear cannot be healed. So if I read 165 in this journal, and I read, find the answer to these questions, and then realize that every answer given is part of the prison I keep myself in. And I read, letting go of these ideas is like taking down the prison walls stone by stone. And I read, when no answer to these questions arises in me, there's also no prison. I go, oh yeah, that's cool. And then I go right on to 166. I didn't do the practice. You see, I read it, I agreed, and I moved on. And I didn't use it to go in and look at myself, my own conditioning. I didn't bring awareness and insight to my own conditioning. And so nothing happened. So again, the 7 steps to awakening says, abandoning mental conditioning, be a liberated soul, right? Abandoning mental conditioning, be a liberated soul. And NTI Matthew chapter 7, verse 6 says, do not take my words lightly without practice. For to listen and to agree, but not to practice, is not to have heard. And one who will not hear cannot be healed, cannot become the liberated soul, right? So moving on to the next journal entry that I have highlighted. We're moving over to number 170. Number 170. I shall, and this is the 7 steps to awakening. I shall instruct you if you are in a receptive mood and cherish my words. If one playfully instructs another merely in answer to a query, when the latter does not intend to receive, cherish, and assimilate the teaching, it becomes fruitless. I shall instruct you if you are in a receptive mood and cherish my words. If one playfully instructs another merely in answer to a query, when the latter does not intend to receive, cherish, and assimilate the teaching, it becomes fruitless. One thing that's a little bit funny to me as I read this right now is when it says, if one playfully instructs another. I don't know if I contemplated that before, but I think this speaks to the part of the mind that wants to be the teacher. And the part of the mind, and that may show up in some individuals, but not others, right? The part of the mind that wants to be the teacher is eager for the questioning student, because I get to teach, I get to play teacher now, right? And what this seems to be saying is, you know, if the devotee on the other end isn't a sincere devotee, well, then the whole point is fruitless. And it reminds me of, you know, like Ramana Maharshi. Ramana Maharshi, although he was a great guru, never played teacher. If you know anything about Ramana Maharshi, there were lots of questions that were put forth to him, even after he began speaking, even after there was an ashram, that he simply did not answer. And I can honestly confess that at one time when I was earlier, I would read, you know, that this question was put forth and he did not answer. And I thought he was rude. Later, however, I came to realize through being in the teacher role myself, that it begins to feel like a waste of words, a waste of energy, when a question is asked that is not coming from the inner sincere devotee. And what happens if you aren't interested in playing teacher is you begin to tire of these questions very quickly, because they're just taking energy. They're often distracting from the central message, right? They're pushing the direction out in another place rather than keeping the energy focused on what the teaching would be in the moment. So whatever this I is here, let's see. I'm not sure who we're reading here, but you know, when I read it now, I think of the inner teacher. It says the Supreme Yoga, the Yoga Vasista, which is a book. I shall instruct you if you are in a receptive mood and cherish my words. You know, if you are the sincere devotee, and when I expel the energy to share an answer with you, if you then take that answer in very deeply, then I'll answer you. But if there's any indication that, you know, any sense that that's not what's going on here, well, then I'm not going to answer you. It's fruitless. You know, and I'm sure this is how Ramana Maharshi felt on those times when he didn't answer questions. It was fruitless. It wasn't worth expelling the energy, right? I shall instruct you if you are in a receptive mood and cherish my words. That puts the responsibility on us. And I kind of just demonstrated that a moment ago when I talked about even, I mean, I'm reading my own journal, you know, and yet I'm letting my own journal be the teacher. Because when it's guiding, you know, it guides to look at these questions, I am looking at those questions. You know, I am in a receptive mood when I read my own journal. I am cherishing the words when I read my own journal. So the sincere devotee is coming to this. And as a result, there are pages and pages of journaling happening. My journal is upstairs now, but I think I showed it to you last week. Just pages and pages of clarity coming from the inner teacher, because I am bringing the devotee. Now, interestingly, I bring both the devotee and the teacher. Remember, there's no separation. But the teacher shows up because the devotee is showing up. Without the devotee, it's fruitless. And so the teacher doesn't appear. So I suppose one question we can ask ourselves is, am I bringing the sincere devotee even to my own private time with my inner teacher, so that I call forth the teacher with my sincerity? I shall instruct you if you are in a receptive mood and cherish my words. If one playfully instructs another merely in answer to a query, when the latter does not intend to receive, cherish, and assimilate the teaching, it becomes fruitless. Now, I don't take questions much anymore, Anish, but let's see what you have to say.
Regina, can you hear me well?
Yes, I hear you.
I had a quick clarification question about the previous quote. Would that be okay?
Yes, a clarification question is fine.
So I noticed that when I look at my conditioning, some of it I can easily let go, like you mentioned earlier. I also see a pattern where some of my conditioning I can let go over time, meaning 6 months after now, if I look at it, I'm like, okay, that's fine with me now. But some of it I've not been able to let go for years, maybe decades even. My clarification question was that by doing this practice, the journaling and bringing awareness on that conditioning, the abandonment of that conditioning is the miracle that you're pointing us to.
Yes, yes. And so any conditioning that has not gone away on its own, I would just keep looking at. When the prompt comes to do it, I would just, repeat, right? Just do that again. And in fact, I'm going through my Out of the Stillness journal now. Now very, very slowly, but it's my 4th time through. I'm also going through NTI, which maybe was written through my hand, possibly for the 30th time. I mean, I really have lost count. I'm going through it in the same way. When something comes up in it to journal on, I'm journaling. So you can see that as you go through, certain things get healed or taken care of, but then there's still more to look at, and there's still more to look at, right? So I don't say, hey, I've read NTI, I know what this says. If I did that, then I wouldn't get what I can still get out of it. So I approach it as the sincere devotee, in spite of the fact that my hand wrote it, and in spite of the fact that I've probably read it / taught it 30 times. So just keep going.
Anything special for the very heaviest of the conditioning on the repeated iterations, or just the sincerity of looking at it again and again and again is what you're pointing us to?
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So we've looked at this 170 we're looking at. I'll just read it one more time, and then we'll go see what I put in the journal. I shall instruct you if you are in a receptive mood and cherish my words. If one playfully instructs another merely in answer to a query, when the latter does not intend to receive, cherish, and assimilate, that's important, the teaching, it becomes fruitless. So let's see what I wrote in the journal. Why should I contemplate the 7 steps to awakening? Why should I keep this journal? Why read what is written in this journal again and again? Because my heart guides me to. Because in this moment, there is nothing I'd rather do than be in devotion, contemplation with these teachings. And maybe this kind of goes back to some degree to what Anish and I were just talking about. Can you hear the sincerity in this? It's just coming to it with sincerity over and over and over again. And I really feel that every time we come to it with sincerity, something is accomplished, whether we realize it or not. I don't think we are aware of every miracle. But I don't think there is ever a wasted moment of coming to our private God time with sincerity. And so that's really what this quote is saying. You know, the quote in the 7 Steps to Awakening was saying, you know, come to me with sincerity and I'll teach you. But if you don't come to me with sincerity, I'm not going to waste my time. That's basically what it said, right? And so I come to the journal and I say, why should I do this? Why should I do this work? Why should I read this book, The 7 Steps to Awakening? Some of y'all have read it. You know what these quotes are like. They're not the easiest things to read. Why should I do that? Why should I journal? And then why should I read my own journal over and over and over again, which is the recommendation? Why should I do that? Because my heart or my sincerity guides me to. Because in this moment, there is nothing I'd rather do than be in devotion, contemplation with these teachings. In other words, I am sincere. And so I can trust this process, right? And although I can't remember the exact quote right now, there is a quote by Nisargadatta Maharaj where he points out that the only thing that is truly needed is sincerity. With sincerity, everything will fall into place. Those aren't his words, but that's his point. But without the sincerity, it's just a waste of energy. Number 171. I'm going back to the 7 Steps to Awakening. A notional existence ceases only by the dawn of right knowledge and the cessation of all notions. See what I mean about reading some of these quotes? I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I've read these quotes many times now, so they're much easier for me to understand upon reading. But I remember reading these quotes the first time, and literally, here's what the resistance would say. Oh my God, now I got to contemplate this. Have any of y'all felt that when reading this book? Oh my God, you know. But then you bring your sincerity to it and something happens. So a notional existence ceases only by the dawn of right knowledge and the cessation of all notions. Since the notional existence is unreal, it ceases naturally when the truth is realized. And of course, notional existence is, you know, just the thinking, right? Just the I in thought and all of the ideas. And it's saying this will cease naturally when you realize what you really are. And that, of course, is because the only reason it appears to exist is we keep giving it that attention, right? So number 171 and out of the stillness. And by the way, if we're in 171, we're looking at stuff that I wrote, you know, in 2012, just to give you some perspective. Have no fear. The thought, I cannot awaken, is a false thought delivered into your presence by a false mind. You are neither the thought nor the thinker of the thought. You are the presence into which this thought and the idea of its thinker is presented. Since you are that which you are, that which you are is natural and ever present. By keeping your attention on this realization shall become clear because it is true and it is obvious. obvious truth is noticed when it is looked for. It can only be missed when one doesn't want to see. So let me read this quote one more time, because really these two go quite well together. And then I'll come back and we'll look at 171 a little more slowly in the journal. So the quote that was being contemplated: a notional existence ceases only by the dawn of right knowledge and the cessation of all notions. Since the notional existence is unreal, it ceases naturally when the truth is realized. So it's interesting that I started this with have no fear, because if this is the first thing that was written, then you know that what was also present was this fear, which we often call doubt, right? This fear that I will never awaken. How many of y'all have those thoughts or have had those thoughts? Yeah, right? I will never awaken. So it starts off with have no fear. The thought, I cannot awaken, is a false thought delivered into your presence by a false mind. And then it says, you are neither the thought nor the thinker of the thought. You are the presence into which this thought and the idea of its thinker is presented. So let's see if I can guide you to look at this. So many of you raised your hand, and I think even those who didn't raise their hand have probably seen the thought, just didn't want to raise their hand for some reason. Too much energy, right? Don't want to waste any energy here. But let's look at that thought, I cannot awaken, and just take a moment to really allow yourself to feel how real that thought can feel sometimes. I cannot awaken. I mean, what I hear in that thought is there's something wrong with me. I am not good enough. I will never be good enough. If I go deep enough into that thought, what I can really hear in there is I alone will not awaken. You know, like somehow everybody else can, just not me, right? You guys, can you find that in there? I am the one that will not awaken. I alone will not awaken. So what this is saying is that we are the presence that this thought is appearing in. So right now, I don't want to change anything about the thought. I want the thought to be exactly as it is. You know, this thought carries with it a message that I am not good enough, that I will never be good enough, that I alone will not awaken. And I'm going to allow all that to be there. But I want to shift my attention, I guess. That doesn't feel like exactly the right word, but I want to shift my attention ever so slightly, where instead of focusing on that bundle of thought, the thought is like a little bundle. Instead of focusing on the bundle, I'm focusing on the presence. I'm allowing the bundle to remain there, but focus on the presence. Can I see? Can you see that it's true that I am the presence into which the thought is appearing? Can you see that? Can you feel that? Notice we don't have to change the thought at all. I mean, that is amazing to me. We don't have to clean it up. We don't have to make it say, oh yeah, you can awaken. We don't have to turn it into an affirmation. It can be exactly what it is. We can even look at it honestly. We can allow ourselves to feel the message. And then we just shift our looking ever so slightly to notice, wait a minute. I am the presence. I am the present that this little baby thought is showing up in. So we've already seen that at least the first part of 171 is true. That I am the presence into which this thought is showing up in. But it also says, and we're going to look at this too, I hope I can guide you in it. It also says the idea of the thinker shows up in my presence. So when I'm looking at this thought, when my attention is zeroed into the thought, and the thought is saying, I will never awaken. I am not good enough. I will never be good enough. I alone will never be good enough. The I is what we want to turn our attention to now. The I in all of those sentences. I am believing that I am the thinker. That I think I will never awaken. That I think I am not good enough. That I think I alone will never be good enough. But is that true? Now shift your attention again to the presence. Let this I, this imagined thinker, be exactly as it is. But notice that you are the presence that the idea of the thinker is arising in. Can you see that? It's an idea of a thinker. And you are the presence that the idea of the thinker is arising in. So this says, have no fear. The thought, I cannot awaken, is a false thought delivered into your presence by a false mind. You are neither the thought nor its thinker. You are neither the thought nor the thinker of the thought. See, the I, which is a part of the thought, is imagined to be me as the thinker. But if I just shift my attention, I can see that I'm the presence this idea is showing up in. This idea of a thinker. It's an idea, not a truth. So you are neither the thought nor the thinker of the thought. You are the presence into which this thought and the idea of its thinker is presented. Since you are that which you are, meaning the presence, since you are that which you are is natural and ever present. By keeping your attention on this realization shall become clear because it is true and it is obvious. Obvious truth is noticed when it's looked for. It can only be missed when one doesn't want to see. So when the thought shows up, whatever thought shows up, right now we're using the thought, I will never awaken. When the thought shows up, I will never awaken, and we just believe it. Oh my God, I will never awaken, right? What's missing in that moment is our wanting to shift our attention and notice who we are. Ramana Maharshi called this self-inquiry. And so what we want to bring to any thought is that desire to repeatedly check and see who I am, what's true. Repeatedly shift our attention from the thought and the idea of the thinker to the presence. Notice this appears in me. And what this is saying is, if I do this over and over and over again, what we call awakening has to occur, because it's not really awakening. It's just noticing the truth as the truth, the obvious truth that's always here, and noticing, oh yeah, that is true, right? To a point to where we stay with it. You know, it's not a temporary insight. Oh yeah, I am that presence. I've seen it over and over and over and over and over again. Every time I check, it's true. Not once have I checked and thought not true, right? What this is saying is the only time we don't notice it is when we don't check, right? So what's missing is the checking. But if we check, it's true every time. I love that some of you guys are laughing at this. I think that's great because, you know, we laugh at what's true, right? I saw a comedian once say, a good comedian knows the secret of comedy is that people laugh at what's true. So all you got to do is get on stage and tell them what's true and they'll laugh their butts off, right? So I love that you guys are laughing at this because it's true. Every time we check, it's true. So the only thing that's missing is the not checking, right? But if we keep checking and we keep checking and we keep checking, and it's true every time, eventually the truth of it sticks. And that's what we call awakening. It's just recognizing the truth. And of course, if you were able to follow me and as I led you through this very simple exercise, then you're able to check whenever you want. Just shift that attention to noticing, I'm the presence that this appears in. So I'll read from the journal one more time. Number 171. Have no fear. The thought, I cannot awaken, is a false thought delivered into your presence by a false mind. You are neither the thought nor the thinker of the thought. You are the presence into which this thought and the idea of its thinker is presented. Since you are that which you are is natural and ever present. By keeping your attention on this realization shall become clear because it is true and it is obvious. And we all just saw that, right? Obvious truth is noticed when it is looked for. It can only be missed when one doesn't want to see, or when we don't feel like checking in the moment. That's just, you know, right? We're just not doing the practice. So number 172, I'll start by reading from the 7 Steps to Awakening. Give up all your doubts. Resort to moral courage. Give up all your doubts. Resort to moral courage. Okay, let's go to 172. Do not waste time entertaining doubts, such as I cannot awaken, or the truth is not true, it is the world that is real. These thoughts only induce fear and uncertainty. Instead, check within the heart in each current moment and ask, what am I to do now? How am I to see this? How am I to respond? If you always do as your heart guides you to do, even as your mind leads you to doubt, you are walking sure-footed on the right road. So this is interesting because this is giving us what appears to be another option. Another option to checking is surrender. And it's interesting because Ramana Maharshi, if you people often talk about Ramana Maharshi teaching self-inquiry, which he did, don't get me wrong. But if you really pay attention to self-inquiry, really pay attention to Ramana Maharshi's teachings, he also taught surrender. And in fact, he seemed to imply that for some people, the self-inquiry would become more natural, and that would be easier for them. And for other people, the surrender would become more natural, and that would be easier for them. And if you've read the teachings of Inner Ramana, what he told me was I was capable of both, and therefore I should do both, right? That as his student, I was to do both. But what's nice about this, let's say that I just led through this exercise a moment ago, and you really didn't notice that you are the presence that this thought is in. Does that mean that you really are the loser, the one that will never awaken? No. It just means that maybe you need to try another method. And so here's another method that's being given. This method is saying that when your mind starts to fill up with, of course, it's using the I cannot awaken example, which is probably what was going on with me that day. When your mind starts using the I cannot awaken, the truth is not true, the world is all that's true, or whatever, and you recognize, this is not a helpful energy. I can feel myself being pulled down, right? This is not that God vibration Regina talks about, and being pulled right out of it. And maybe the checking to notice that you're the presence that this is in, it's not working. What do? You ask, what am I to do? Let your guidance come in that moment. What am I to do? How am I to see this? How am I to respond, if at all, Ramana says. So again, I feel like beating the drum nonstop, getting up on the soapbox. I think I talked about the soapbox at CSU. One thing that we often do not do enough is go within to our inner teacher. And that's what this is saying. Instead of just struggling with your mind being what feels like attacked by doubt or by anger or by grievance or by fear or by anything else, instead of just feeling like the victim of that, either do what was in quote number 171, check. Notice you are the presence this is appearing in, and you may be free in that moment. That's called self-inquiry. Or ask, what am I to do now? And some of y'all have recently heard the story because they went over at Early Insights a few weeks ago. Some of you recently heard the story about when I went to North Carolina to get the house and it did not work out, at least at first. And all that fear came over me. I had thrown away this great life for this stupid spiritual crap. And that's pretty low, right? But then those two thoughts came into my mind to help me. One was, I am not a victim of the world I see. And then the other one was, peace pilgrim. The ego knows the weakest spot in your armor. And when those two thoughts appeared in my mind, I realized I was under ego attack. I mean, the mental conditioning had control of me. Does anybody know what I did next? Does anybody remember the story? What I did, because I didn't think I could even hear guidance, right? That's how low I couldn't ask. I couldn't check and notice I'm the presence. I couldn't ask, how am I to see this and expect to hear anything? Because I had gone so far down the rabbit hole. So I grabbed what at that time was my primary study book, A Course in Miracles. And I said, please, 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 let me open this to exactly what I need to read right now. And when I did that and I began reading, I began to start back up. And it was a longer journey up, but I began to start back up. So, but that was another way of asking for guidance, right? Okay, and Eduardo, yes, email me. All right. So I think that's it for today. So it's been nice seeing you all. I hope you continue to have a wonderful holiday season. By the time I see you next week, we'll be back to our normal routines, whatever those normal routines are, right? So I'll see you then. Bye.